Hi, folks. This is Abel James, and you're listening to the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Today's special episode of the show is with my buddy Darryl Edwards, the fitness explorer. We talk about how you can move in an ancestrally appropriate way and how to integrate some play into your life. But before we get to the show, I wanted to let you guys know that if you hop on over to fatburningman.com and put your best email in and sign up for the email list, we have lots of cool stuff coming out very soon down the pike. Some resources in intermittent fasting. We talk about some of our new cookbooks. You also get a free ebook for signing up, as well as, let's see, we have some biohacking stuff coming up very soon. So those of you interested in fatty coffee and that sort of thing, there's going to be a heck of a lot more down the road. So all you have to do is sign up for my mailing list at fatburningman.com and we'll hook you right up. All right, so in the show with Darryl, we talk about what it's like to be a desk jockey who gets no sleep and works way too hard, and switch from that with being a skinny fat person. He was, I think, 26% body fat, going to a dude who can just deadlift several people at a time. So he is a treasure trove of knowledge and fun when it comes to integrating play into your life. Very cool show. Darryl's an awesome guy. He's a book coming out in June. I can't wait to read it. So stay tuned for the show. I know that you guys will really dig it. Here we go. Here it is. All right, folks, we're here with Darryl Edwards, who's a natural movement therapist and a paleo clinical nutritionist based in London. After nearly two decades working in investment banking as a computer scientist, Darryl abandoned the life of a desk jockey in favor of eating delicious steak and playing outside, my kind of dude. And he also has the coolest glasses on the planet. How are things across the pond?
It's well, sun's not long gone down now. I had a great day of play. So spending so much time outdoors and getting in touch with nature.
Awesome.
And what a great way to wrap up and now to commence a conversation with yourself, Abel. You know, what a perfect end to the day.
Ah, well, thank you. I agree, even though it's afternoon here. Um, so I'm really interested in your background. It's in many ways similar to mine, although I think you were even more of a desk jockey than I was when we met up a few months ago at Paleo FX. We talked about how much you used to be in front of a computer or sitting down at a desk. Can you explain to people like what your life looked like a few years back?
Okay, I mean, you're probably talking, 6, 7 a.m. starts, working, if you were fortunate getting a break at lunchtime, which was probably getting a sandwich
Yeah.
at lunchtime, and working through until 6, 7, 8 p.m. at night. And then once I got home, so after the commute back home, I probably would tend to log on again because there could be issues running up into the early hours of the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So I got used to surviving in quotes on a few hours sleep a night. I believe that I was invincible and I could continue this kind of work rate, and often that was 7 days a week.
Wow.
of this relentless kind of work ethic,
Yeah.
financially very rewarding, and very challenging, intellectually very challenging.
Right.
But there came a point where one, I noticed my health starting to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And I just put that down to getting older,
Yeah.
and not realizing actually it was because it was a lifestyle, the lifestyle that I was leading that was
Right.
leading to ill health. And secondly, no longer being motivated by, financially by what I was doing. I actually wanted to start helping people rather than to help people make lots of money. So, so that was part of the decision to kind of review my kind of the direction that I was willing to take in life, and to acknowledge the fact that there was going to be a serious drop in income,
Mm-hmm.
when I commenced that journey. And once I adjusted to that and realized, I'm happy now, and I can actually spend time focusing on my health and having that transformation myself. I can now share it with others. It's life is far more rewarding.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's a really important learning, and I think becoming a more and more common story in the ancestral health community. People, kind of start off as eye bankers or consultants like myself or other people in business, and they kind of got to this point where they're like, is this really the life that I should be leading? And usually that happens when your health starts to suffer a little bit. So what happened to you specifically?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I was always a weak individual,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember. I mean, just going back, I remember my dad. So I grew up in the '70s. I was a child in the '70s, and I remember my father was just. I mean, he was an invincible man and very strong. And I remember thinking he was very a unique individual. And now I realize he was just he was just performing the capabilities of a man.
Yeah.
We should be able to perform. But he was remarkably strong. And as I got into my teens and out of my teens, I remember feeling like a pale shadow of my father, and I put it down to I just wasn't passed on, this kind of genetic,
Mm-hmm.
this heritage from my father. But even when I look at my mother, she was also very strong, kind of healthy, robust individual.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I went to university and then commenced my day job, whatever I did around that, extracurricular activities like going to the gym, taking up various sports, there was always something missing and lacking, and I never really felt healthy. I kind of felt as if I was just in survival mode. I was young, so you can kind of take a lot of knocks.
Yeah.
And I got into sort of mid 30s, and that's when the cracks started to appear. So always quite a slim individual until sort of early to mid 30s, and spare tires started to form. The suits weren't fitting as well. I was spending a bit more on the tailoring to make sure I could still kind of hide, the stomach.
Yeah.
I suffered a lot from low back pain. I probably get an episode of two of chronic, serious levels of back pain.
Yeah.
Where I was surviving on painkillers basically to move, to be able to walk. I had kind of ligament problems, so knee, ankle problems, and I was told by the time I was 40, I'd have to get some sort of knee reconstruction to be able to walk.
Right.
I remember getting a body fat percentage test. So for a very lean guy, to be told I had a 26% body fat.
Wow, really?
Level. So not BMI. This is actually so bio impedance test.
Right.
26%. So I found out several years ago that I was one of those kind of skinny fat individuals.
Right.
Kind of looked okay on the outside, but very high levels of internal body fat. So it was at this sort of point where I started to explore an alternative view of fitness at the time. So I came across sort of this high intensity, multidiscipline approach to fitness through CrossFit, and Jim Jones primarily was one of the main inspirations. And I remember by this kind of all-round approach to fitness, I got very fit and stronger in a very, very short space of time. And I realized this was what I was, partially what I was missing from my approach to fitness.
Right.
But my nutrition wasn't aligned. So I was still going for the, looking at as many supplements as I could, going for the whey protein shakes, looking at food as just to support my kind of fitness goals, rather than thinking about food being for health. So that's when I came across paleo nutrition. I read the book a couple of years earlier. I didn't buy into it at all.
Yeah.
It was like, what have I got in common with a caveman?
Right.
I just don't see the relationship with somebody in the modern era. And it was a case of, well, you know what? I will get tested, get some blood tests before going encountering paleo, and seeing what my health status is, and I'll get tested afterwards. So my before state, I had really poor cholesterol profile, very high blood glucose profile. I was suffering from seborrheic dermatitis to the point where it was almost embarrassing to go outdoors.
Wow.
So and the dermatologist couldn't pinpoint what exactly the problem was. Was it diet? Was it environmental?
Right.
Is it just genetic? And I went on all sorts of treatment, steroid creams and the like to try and to reduce the inflammation. So there was like almost like a snowball of all of these incidents occurring and all these health issues occurring. And I was given a lot of warning signs from anyone I met in the medical profession. So it was like, Darryl, you're encountering this. You're only 35. What's going to happen down the road.
Right.
So that was my kind of early warning sign that I need to do something radically different.
Mm-hmm.
So fitness was the first kind of approach of or changing my approach to fitness, I should say, because I was always kind of meddling in the gym, being a bit of a gym bunny.
Yeah.
But but I wasn't really seeing results, and I'd try and work out for the summer, try and get kind of t-shirt ready, or t-shirt off ready
Yeah.
for the summer. I'd look good for a couple of weeks. Rest of the year didn't really matter. I would follow whatever the magazines were saying was the workout of the week or the month. That's what I would kind of jump on. But I wanted something that I could maintain for the rest of my life. So that was my kind of entry point. I then encountered an even wider array of fitness, which is what I kind of practice and kind of preach about now.
Mm-hmm.
And the nutrition, which was also a radical transformation. So when I got retested, I remembered my doctor was very concerned about in his view, my dietary restrictions. So he was very concerned about me maintaining this for a long time, and
Right.
he was expecting to see results that were detrimental to my health. And I remember him saying to me, "I'm away for 2 or 3 weeks on holiday, but I'm expecting there to be some bad news here. So I'll give you a call whilst I'm away in the Maldives or wherever he was, and I'll give you a person to give you a call."
Yeah.
About 10 days into his holiday, I received a phone call. So you can imagine the anxiety levels. I was like, oh my
Right.
goodness, what's going to happen now?
Yeah.
What are you telling me? And he was basically elated. He was shocked at the results. One of the things he said was, "Your cholesterol profile is like a newborn baby." He was like, I need to do further research into whatever you're doing. It's working.
Yeah.
I don't understand why this is the case, but I want to find out a lot more. He now recommends paleo
Wow.
clinically to his patients.
How
So
cool is that?
so yeah, for me, the arguments, the kind of romantic view of our ancestry wasn't good enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, I'm not going to be hunting a mammoth anytime soon. And even if Paleolithic man was eating in this way, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a healthier way to eat.
Yeah.
But having the kind of scientific and the clinical backing from an independent source,
Mm-hmm.
there was no kind of bias. There was no kind of paleo bias. In the results, it was just what clinicians were saying.
Mm-hmm.
That was what turned the corner for me. So I felt better. I looked better. I was healthier. I had the clinical endorsement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what then spurred me on to study nutrition and to look at focus on paleo as the path for nutritional kind of health.
Yeah. That is so cool.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of my kind of journey.
Right. So for people who are early in the process, and I myself as well read the paleo diet originally, and I'm like, I'm not so sure about this whole thing, especially with like the lean meats. And back then it was talking a lot about saturated fat and canola oils and in ways that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. So I think people still, when they hear about paleo, they kind of think it's an all-you-can-eat meat fest, and that it's still kind of like that romanticized version of the past. What sort of advice would you give to someone like that who's a little bit skeptical right now? What changes did you make, and how could they make changes just to give it a shot to see if it does work for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, people are put off by the imagery sometimes, this kind of caveman imagery, and the kind of food food porn,
Yeah.
I may, so these glamorous pictures of all meat dishes, usually huge amount, kind of Henry VIII kind of feast,
Right.
Portions of food, and I think this is off-putting for a lot of people, especially when you're given the message that red meat is unhealthy, high levels of saturated fat are unhealthy. So I think for many people, the switch to this almost carnivorous diet, I personally don't believe is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
This is my personal opinion. I think we are omnivores. I think that is our biological and physiological heritage,
right.
And we have the physiology to be able to digest and to handle meat. But we also have the physiology to handle vegetation or vegetable matter,
mm-hmm.
And our diet should be balanced on that basis. So I think anyone who's concerned about the science or the biochemistry, I don't believe you need to have a PhD to follow paleo.
Right.
So I think, again, some of the arguments put forward require you to have this very high level of biochemistry theory in order for you to convince others that it's what you should be eating.
Right.
Or you need to be a chef because you've got to cook these wonderful and glamorous meals and spend hours and hours preparing and get all sorts of equipment in the kitchen to be able to prepare these meals. So I think, people are put off by the extremes, the kind of paleo extremes.
Mm-hmm.
And for myself, I had a very gentle entry into paleo. It was kind of like, okay, so now I can start eating red meat again because I stopped eating red meat previously. I was only eating fish and say chicken.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, now I'm going to start introducing red meat. First change for me there alone was I was diagnosed with iron-based anemia.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to get any iron and take any iron supplements, but that disappeared.
Yeah,
30 days of eating meat, 2-3 times a week, red meat.
Amazing.
That disappeared. So that was good enough for me,
right?
to continue to eat red meat. And I'm now eating probably more vegetation now than I did previously. So I'm eating more vegetables. I'm eating foods that are seasonal. I'm making better choices and asking questions about the sources of food.
Right.
And so I'm pretty strict. I'm a pretty strict paleo guy. So I don't do dairy, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do legumes. I don't really have any cheat days. I'm fairly strict, but that's because when I have kind of done some personal experimentation or I've had lab results, I've seen some markers of health change.
Mm-hmm.
So for myself, it's like, well, no, I actually want to maintain a good health profile. So I think anyone's concerned about the science, just get yourself a baseline of blood tests.
Yeah.
Get your cholesterol, get your blood glucose. You don't have to spend lots of money. Just get a standard blood profile. See what your state of health is there. Get your blood pressure checked. Get your body fat percentage checked. Try paleo for 4 weeks,
right.
a month or so, and then retest. And most people guaranteed will see a change in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
See some sort of physical transformation. That's almost a guarantee. So much anecdotal evidence is out there. So many before and after photos are out there. But to be honest, lots of people can have the same before and after photo following other forms of nutrition.
That's a very good point.
Exercise programs. So for me, this isn't good enough. The one thing I think we have almost uniquely in the paleo work sphere is the clinical kind of validation of making this change.
Yes.
And even if you can't explain that, even if you can't explain the why this has happened, it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be my recommendation. Follow the paleo prescription, pretty much the basics. See how you feel with that. If you want to modify it because you feel it may be too limiting, then you may include dairy, but then you want to make sure you're going for raw dairy, raw milk. You're making the best choice of whatever food you're going to be selecting that you want to incorporate into your kind of modified paleo diet.
Right.
Of course, if you're suffering from any health issues, any kind of autoimmune problems or any kind of inflammation-based chronic diseases, then you have to take a more kind of strict stance.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've just got to try it. try it, see if you can live with it, experience the benefits, visual as well as kind of internal.
Hmm.
And I think then you have the motivation to continue. So for myself, it wasn't good enough just to look good in the mirror, or look better
Hmm.
in the mirror. It was like, well, I want to do this for my health, and so whenever I'm feeling as if I need to have that, get tempted by the French bread stick that's been handed to me, I can kind of go, actually, you know what? It smells nice. I'm sure it's going to taste wonderful, but I know it's going to have a detrimental impact on my health.
Yeah.
So I'm okay. I'm okay, thank you. Whereas if you're just looking at it as something that's a limitation or
Yeah.
restriction to your diet, you're constantly going to be tempted and overwhelmed by the kind of smorgasbord of
Right.
foods that are out there that you're supposed to refrain from.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what worked for me. That's what I recommend to my clients. Have a health focus. Doesn't mean you have to live like a monk, but I think if you follow 80% of the prescription, 80% of the time, most people will have a marked improvement in health.
Hmm.
And if you scale that up, even more, then I think you're gonna experience more benefits sooner.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so that's a take home for for me, and that's what I definitely recommend to others.
Right. And I really like your point about the nice smelling French bread, because it is like the way that you described saying no is perfect, I think, because can you still be tempted? Yes, of course. Like everyone knows that a great fresh piece of French bread can be delicious, but at the same time, it doesn't really fit with your lifestyle anymore or with your belief system. And it was really interesting. I actually just went to a reunion back at my college, Dartmouth, and so I was hanging out with a lot of old friends.
Mm,
And I may or may not have partied a bit when I was in college, and so a lot of them were a bit surprised when I said, I don't drink beer anymore.
yeah,
Every
yeah,
once in a while I will have a really, really good microbrew or something like that. But they're drinking Keystone Light, the worst of the worst, made with GMO
mm,
corn and all these chemicals, and they're playing drinking games and stuff. And I know how fun that is, but
yeah,
um,
yeah,
but it's so interesting because I was expecting to get a lot of crap from them when I said
mm,
that. But
mm,
most people are just like, "Oh, that's so cool!" Like,
yeah. Which
especially
is
people. What's that?
yeah, that was a great response. I mean,
Yeah.
and probably unexpected response actually, but
Absolutely, but people
yeah,
like they can be a lot cooler than you think with that. It's just
mm,
like, well, I'm not going to eat French bread, and it doesn't mean that it has to offend the other person. Sometimes food can be very personal, of course,
yeah,
but it's not always. And so if it doesn't fit in with what you believe now, it makes the decision almost automatic because it's like you said, it's not a smorgasbord of options. That's pretty overwhelming psychologically, and then your willpower just gives out at some point.
yeah,
But
yeah,
if you see if you're looking at the buffet line and only half the foods are paleo, and you kind of identify as a paleo person, then that makes the decision pretty easy. You
yeah,
go for the veggies, a big old heaping plate of veggies, and then you go for a bit of the meat, and
yeah, yeah.
that's pretty easy.
It's pretty easy. Yeah, people often ask, it must be so difficult for you to eat out. It must be so difficult for you to be invited for dinner. And usually the pressure is on the host because they
Right.
suspect they have to really pull out all the stops to give you a meal that's going to be you're going to be comfortable with. And often like, okay, so what's going to be your main course? Oh yeah, we're probably going to do some grilled salmon and some broccoli and some other mixed veg and maybe some rice. And I'll
Hmm.
go, I tell you what, I'm happy with the grilled salmon. I'm just give instead of the rice, I'll just have more veg.
Hmm.
That's it. Job done. And
Easy.
I tend not to go into any more detail. Are you going to be, is there going to be any flour added or, unless I feel as if I probably need to go push it a little bit further. But
Right.
but in most cases, I think people would then ask you, well, okay, is there anything that you definitely don't want to be eating, or
Right.
and they feel involved in the process of hosting, rather than just feel as if you're just being objecting to anything they're likely to do,
Right.
and that I think starts a dialogue. I don't kind of push it. I mean, some people probably say I do try and push paleo quite a bit,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to relax a bit and just say, well, this is just my decision. I am healthier now, but you know, everyone needs to make their own decisions as to what they feel is beneficial for them. And you know, you know, if somebody told me when I first encountered paleo that I just had to eat this way because it's the only way, I know my back would have been, you know, would have been pushed up
Yeah,
immediately,
yeah,
and I would have resisted and gone, well, no, I'm not buying this. It took me at least a couple of years
hmm
of kind of constantly questioning and like, there's something not quite right about this argument. Okay,
right.
let me try it myself. Um, and then then I just went back to my childhood. Actually, I remember thinking about the foods that were prepared by my parents,
Hmm.
um, where they couldn't rely on lots of processed foods, where we were going to get the chicken from you know, picking the chicken out,
Yeah,
fresh chicken, and you know, we didn't have the array of supermarkets as we do today. So you know, you had to go to the grocer, you had to go to the baker to get your bread, you had
yeah,
to go to the fishmongers to get your fish, and so you were involved in the process of, even in the city as a city boy, of finding out where your food came from,
hmm
checking, you know, the quality of the food, how fresh it was, getting advice from the specialist in that area, so the
right.
fishmonger, for example. And I realized that was missing for me as an adult. I totally almost, you know, blocked out that part of my upbringing because it didn't fit into the, you know, latter part of the 20th century.
Yeah,
But a lot of that has now come back, and I realized you don't have to go back 10,000 years
exactly.
to improve you know, the quality of the food that you're eating. You know, you can go back for me, if I go back 30 years,
Right.
most of the decisions that were made by my parents in terms of what I ate were flawless.
Yeah.
And they weren't nutritionists.
hmm
They weren't involved in the healthcare industry. They were just preparing food and telling me the message that this is going to make you big and strong, Darryl. And you have no choice. You have to eat this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you drink that can of soda, that's all you're going to be getting. Drink water for the rest of the week.
Yeah.
These kind of lessons that you kind of go at the time complained about, but
hmm
now I realize, yeah, there was something in that. And going back to basics can just be going back, you know, a couple of, you know, a generation or
hmm
two ago is enough of a reference
Yeah, I
for
talk
us.
about that a lot. It's I think the 10,000 year thing, or the before agriculture, or the images of hunter gatherers being chased by saber-toothed tigers and trying to beat down woolly mammoths. It's a little bit ridiculous,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so you really don't have to go back that far to see that things were not so bad, you know, just a few generations ago. Where things really started to become a train wreck was, you know, 20-ish years ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
about the time that I was growing up, and certainly the 90s. And now what you're seeing, I mean, I was just driving down the street in New Hampshire while I was visiting a few days ago, and I saw about 5 kids, probably between 10 and 14, and each one of them was easily, you know, 250 pounds. And it's just
Ooh.
heartbreaking to see that, because clearly, you know, the healthy foods that are served in schools and at home are not working, even if they are, you know, zero cholesterol, low fat, with diet and healthy emblazoned all over the labels. Clearly, it's not working. And I'd be willing to bet that a lot of, you know, their parents of those kids, at least, you know, where I was raised, you didn't drink soda all the time. Like
Yeah.
that's not the thing that's at fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really the quality of the food. So it's really neat that you even experienced that while you were growing up. That was just the way that things were. But let's
Just
shift
about,
gears a little bit, because you're working on a really exciting project about ancestral fitness, which is something that people don't really talk about, at least in the way that you do, all that often. It's like CrossFit or nothing, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So why don't you talk about your perspective on play and how that works into a healthy lifestyle?
Yeah, so I've discussed about how I got into kind of the sort of nutrition, paleo nutrition, and that was kind of optimal, I believe, the optimal food for humans. And I started then to question the type of fitness program that I was doing, and I realized that there must be movement patterns that we will thrive
Mm,
based on those activities, and it must be based on survivability. So, you know, we had to be performing tasks in order for us to survive, whether that's, you know, Stone Age or even, you know, the last few generations, in order for us to survive.
hmm
And so me trying to recreate or attempt something that's very highly skilled, very requires an inordinate amount of work effort in order to produce a result. I don't necessarily believe that's the best way to improve one's level of fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, it's a back to basics approach. You know, it's learning how to squat. It's learning how to kind of not have to rely on a chair all the time. It's being able to kind of crawl on all fours. It's being able to climb. You know, it's being able to carry somebody who's injured. You know, it's these kind of very functional kind of day-to-day tasks and kind of extraordinary tasks that we should be able to perform. And, you know, I'm not going to knock CrossFit because it was, you know, it definitely was an entry point for me to stop being one-dimensional in my fitness. You know, It was either, I'm going to go for a run, I'm going to do some bicep curls.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was CrossFit. Now I can do a bit of gymnastics. Now I can do some Olympic lifting. Now I can do some high-intensity training, do some burpees, etc. Mm-hmm. But I remember, for example, I could deadlift. My 1 rep max is about 210 kilos. I think it's about 510 pounds. So it's a pretty good, you know, 1 rep max deadlift.
Totally.
And a friend of mine, you know, we were practicing sort of a human deadlift. A friend of mine's about 90 kilos. So about 40% of my 1 rep max. He's like, you know, dead weight on the ground. And I'm like, yeah, I can easily pick you up. And I couldn't.
Really?
And I tried all sorts of different combinations, concertinaed him, you know, turned him over, lifting one leg then the other. And I realized the deadlift is supposed to be a very transferable move. It's supposed to be a fundamental movement pattern. I can deadlift more than twice this weight. Mm-hmm. Why can't I pick him up off the ground? So I realized that even though I was doing a deadlift, it was only functional if I had an Olympic bar, a known grip, a known method of doing this, you know, lots of training in order to have this perfect deadlift, but it doesn't necessarily transfer to real world.
Right.
So now my approach is about real world fitness. And I think this is what Paleolithic man and all of our ancestors would have had to have done as part of their day-to-day work. They didn't decide one day, I need to do some exercise to be fit.
Sure.
You know, they had to move, and they had to move in ways that the modern man just has no idea of doing. You know, I'm doing a bear crawl in the park, and people say, "What are you doing crawling on the floor? You know, you're an adult. You know, that's for kids." Yeah. And it's like, I remember the only thing I could think of when I was challenged about this, I'm like, actually, you've got a good point. You know, I can walk. I can walk on 2 feet. Why would I need to crawl? And if there's a fire in your home, talking about something quite tragic, but if you have a fire in your home, the safest place to be is prone, is on the ground.
Right.
And you need to be able to crawl. And you need to be able to stay low. You may not necessarily be able to keep your body in full contact with the ground because there could be harsh conditions. So you may need to raise your body off the ground, crawl, keep low, and to get out of, you know, exit from the nearest entrance. So there are practical reasons for doing a bear crawl. You know, it's not just about doing it because it's appearing to be something quite glamorous and primal. Yeah. But actually there are practical benefits in doing this. You know, carrying someone is more practical and functional than me carrying a kettlebell overhead. Right. You know, me being able to shoulder someone, you know, to take them off the ground, shoulder carry them, you know, fireman carry them to safety, I think is practical. Yeah. And this is the type of fitness that I kind of talk about and explore in my book, Paleo Fitness. It's about modifying the activities we do so that there's some real world benefit, a wider range of fitness parameters that are covered, and you're less likely to injure yourself because you're not constantly repeating the same movement pattern over and over again. So most of my clients we don't tend to talk about injuries. I can't remember the last time I was injured. And the last time was when I was doing these highly repetitive, highly skillful moves, right. You know, meant for the elite. But to be honest, most of us aren't elite. Majority of the population are just your average Joe. I'm an average Joe, but realizing that I was just nowhere near reaching my potential. My potential is not to be a competitive athlete. Yeah. My potential is just to be a robust, all-round, holistic human being. And that's why I'm now fitter and healthier now in my 40s than I was in my 20s and 30s. Right. I mean, it's a radical difference. And that's only come about by this holistic approach to fitness.
Mm-hmm. That's terrific. So how do you change a typical CrossFit type workout or lifting workout to be something that is more functional, like you talked about?
Well, you would, you increase the variety of, you change the environment,
Mm-hmm.
you change the equipment that you're using. So, I remember thinking about CrossFit. If I do CrossFit, a lot of CrossFit, I get better at doing CrossFit.
Right.
If I do a lot of running, I get better at running. If I do a lot of climbing, I get better at climbing. So one, you have to widen the kind of scope of what it means to be an all-round athlete, or
Yeah.
cover all-round fitness.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first approach. It was like, okay, I need stamina, I need speed, I need strength, I need power, etc. But there are a lot more parameters that need to be included, and then your activities then have to change. So if I am going to practice a deadlift, I want to practice it not just with an Olympic bar,
Mm-hmm.
but with a sandbag, with a sack of potatoes, with a human being, with a couple of human beings,
Yeah.
maybe shifting a sofa, moving a television. This is the stuff that I may need to do.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be capable at, and I may not be able to have this perfect setup position that will get me brownie points in a gym
Right.
doing a deadlift. Objects, if that's awkward to hold, difficult to get a grip, I still need to be able to perform the movement.
Yeah.
So for me, performing the movement safely and efficiently is more important than to do something clean
Mm-hmm.
with the perfect environment, perfect grip, perfect setup, nice kind of rubber, kind of bouncing plates.
Yeah.
What if I'm at home and I want to practice a deadlift?
Uh-huh.
What do I do then? So yeah, you just improvise, use
Yeah.
your imagination, you play a bit, you actually consider your environment as your gym.
Yeah.
You go to your local park, and people think about, if I go to a park, all I can do is utilize a tree, maybe do some pull-ups,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe I can do some box jumps on the bench. Actually, there's a lot more. There's a lot more you can do in the park. Look at kids.
Mm-hmm.
Don't need much in terms of equipment to play. That you can give them a cardboard box, and they'll invent very quickly. They can invent 10, 20 games
That's
using
so true.
that same box. They'll discard a toy that was in there
Yeah.
to actually really enjoy what they're doing.
Right.
So yeah, you have to have a starting point as some sort of conditioning. But it should be fun and playful at the same time. I hate exercise. I mentioned that at Paleo Effects.
Yeah.
I absolutely abhor exercise. I hate it, and I think the reason being is because it's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
And to make it fun, you've got to do something like Zumba,
Yeah.
or you've got to you've got to basically be a comedian in
Mm-hmm.
order to present exercise to make it appear to be fun. Whereas with my sessions with my clients, 50% of the time they're laughing. It's not necessarily because of my humor or because of my charisma. It's because of the type of play that we're doing, that they're enjoying, where they're re-engaging with their youth, and they're realizing at one point in your life, for everyone, I believe, there was a moment when you realize exploring movement is really fun.
Yeah.
And there comes a point in time when adults will say, enough now, sit down, get back in your high chair, relax, stop running around, stop rushing around, stay closer to mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of enthusiasm is dampened. And then when we talk about play when we're older, doing burpees in the park isn't play, but people will say this is playing, yeah, let's go out and play. Yeah, we're adults playing. We're doing kettlebell swings in the park. This is play. This is primal. I'm doing, a kettlebell snatch. This is primal. Why? Why is that primal? Why? Lifting, carrying, pushing, pulling, jumping, climbing. This is primal.
Yeah.
This is what we have to do as human beings in order to perform the widest array of movement capabilities. Right. And wherever you are in the world, whatever your culture, whatever your race, wherever you're from, even if you have no access to information at all, you'll perform those movements at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this is the real essence of primal movement. If I was on a desert island and I had no internet access, no books, no one actually taught me how to do any forms of formal exercise,
Hmm.
definitely wouldn't be sitting down all day waiting for something to happen.
Right.
So I would definitely look around. I probably would stay close to the ground. I would, may have to hide from predators. I may need to get to a high vantage point to check for predators. I may need to look for food. I may need to want to predate myself. I'm going to need to build shelters. I'm going to need to carry. I'm going to need to lift. I'm not just going to lift something and drop it back down again and go, yeah. I'm going to lift,
Yeah.
carry it somewhere, in order to build.
Yeah.
So there's always a purpose to movement.
Right.
So for me, this is paleo fitness. It's purposeful. It's fully functional. It's something that we all have that innate ability to do, and I want to encourage people to do so without alienating people.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant, Darryl. I can't believe it, but we're actually out of time. But why don't we talk about your next project, where people can find it, and where they can find you in the meantime?
Yeah, so I blog about my lifestyle at thefitnessexplorer.com. I have a number of videos on YouTube, youtube.com/fitnessexplorer. I'm on Facebook. I'm a bit of a Facebook addict, just to spread the word about what I do.
Yeah.
So again, facebook.com/fitnessexplorer. And finally, my book is Paleo Fitness is due out on the 11th of June. It's available for pre-order now on Amazon. And it does cover paleo nutrition. It has some recipes. It has a 2-week food plan, a 12-week exercise kind of program, all based around kind of primal and sort of paleo fitness. So it's fairly complete, and I believe it adds a bit of value to all of the, there's a lot of paleo cookbooks out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of books on paleo nutrition. And then people are kind of told, yeah, you need to do some exercise as well.
Right.
Whereas I believe, yes, you need to eat right, you need to move right, you need to sleep right, and you need to make better decisions, and you need to socialize, and you need to play, you need to work hard, you need to play harder.
Right.
You need to have a healthier, kind of outlook on life. So that's myself, Darryl Edwards, Fitness Explorer. Please connect with me socially. I have so many friends virtually, and I just want more of them.
Yeah.
So talk to me. Let me know how you're feeling. Let me know if I can help. And please get in touch.
That's awesome. I vouch for you, Darryl. You're a very cool guy, and we're definitely virtual friends.
Yes, for sure. More than virtual friends.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on, man. You're welcome anytime.
Cheers, Abel.